What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So all of these leaks around the Switch 2 recently have been absolutely crazy with some of the things we're seeing, images of the motherboard itself, and now we have some other information going around based on some recent documents that may even show some of the features for this new platform and sort of some of the mindset that Nintendo has right now coming off of the current Switch, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a very strange handheld that's now been revealed ahead of CES, and I have a lot of questions for this one. And I can't believe I'm saying this again, but it does seem, based on yet another tease, that we could actually see Valve make that announcement, and this is an interesting one. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Small Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with the PlayStation 2 that's made out of Legos, at least a recent submission that we can actually see here. This is posted up over on Push Square, and what happens is you can have different users that will come up with concepts for Lego sets, and we've seen this in the past with things like Sonic as an example. In this case, Ripple Drive is the person who submitted this. It's an entire PlayStation 2 system. The console, like, it seems to be the original fat model, and if you open it up, you could see parts like the power supply in the back there that looks true to form in that case. Even have the fan and the motherboard laid out. It says it's close to 2,000 pieces, and the memory cards, it's all at a close to 1-to-1 scale. It has passed the initial round of votes, so it needs to get, I think, 10,000 to gain enough support to actually be then considered by Lego, and that's sort of the phase that it's in now. So I think it'd be really fun. Even though I'm not someone who would go out and buy a Lego set like this, I think it'd be fun just to see this get out there as we get these different game consoles you can build out of Legos. Seems like a pretty fun path to go down for these companies. We've seen the Xbox 360, although I'm trying to remember, I think that was it like Mega Bloks or something? I don't think that was Lego, but I think it'd be fun just to see it in general for different game consoles being made out of Legos as sets you can build and then put up on the shelf. Also, we had previously talked about how Secret Level, which is that Amazon series that just covers different video game intellectual properties with, 10 to 15 minute, if you're lucky, episodes, but they were really, really cool to watch. And season 2 has now been greenlit, but we do get some backstory now as to some of the other franchises that the directors were at least thinking about or even approached, which we can see this is posted up. This is over on GameSpot. From one of the directors here, Wilson, went on to say that the team wanted to make a Master Chief and Doom crossover episode and spent a whole weekend writing a letter to Microsoft. However, they were like, nah. Apparently that was the answer. So you could have had Master Chief and Doomslayer in one, what probably would have been 8 to 10 minute episode total. That would have been awesome. They also mentioned that they desperately tried. They said they begged Valve for the Half-Life IP, and they got turned down for that one too. The Halo Doomslayer one, though, was kind of weird because you feel like Microsoft would want to do everything possible just to push some of these franchises forward even more, especially after what happened with Halo, with the whole Paramount series. It was just bad. I feel like it was. So you feel like, oh, let's see if we can get Halo into just a more positive light in this case. And a lot of those Secret Level episodes were really cool. Now, there are, of course, some other factors behind the scenes. There could be more issues with rights and other things. We don't really know the current situation of, say, Doom or Halo with maybe other platforms that they're trying to do series for that they haven't announced yet. So hard to say, but it is a shame that we didn't actually get that, but who knows? There's always season 2. Maybe they'll come back around and say, let's do it. Oh, and did you forget about Everwild? Because I kind of did. That's Rare's new intellectual property they announced like 4 years ago, maybe a little longer. Well, it seems like they're looking to remind people because you can see this. It's one of those like end of year or beginning of the year kind of things to throw out there. Nice little image here. Happy holidays from Rare. And it looks like they are indeed citing Everwild. Okay, saying that there are new things on the horizon here for 2025. And again, they first revealed this back in July 2020. So yeah, it's been 4.5 years now since that was announced, and it seemed like they didn't necessarily have a great idea for the premise of the game when they first announced it. So hey, maybe because it's now maybe 5 years or so, we'll get halfway through this year and they'll be ready to reintroduce it, and I guess we'll see what it looks like then. But it does, at least from what we're seeing here with them starting to set up 2025, them preparing to show it again. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo Switch 2, which is going to become more and more of a topic. I know it's already kind of been a topic for a while now, and even before that, it was the Switch Pro. But let's face it, we're months, maybe weeks even from Nintendo finally making some sort of announcement, because they themselves put out a timetable of end of March 2025, and I don't think they even want to wait that long necessarily. But hey, we'll see soon. However, as we are just seeing leaks straight out of the factory, seemingly with images of not only the motherboard, but the chipset from NVIDIA itself just being out there. And now a certain patent was going around, and I decided to look through this a bit more because it's been updated multiple times, and it really starts to fall in line with some of the stuff that NVIDIA is doing with DLSS and AI upscaling, and how Nintendo has been researching this alongside of them for quite some time now, years and years in fact, and it seems like it's all building up to, you guessed it, their new system. Well, as I was going through this patent, I noticed a few things, and it was also sort of going around online, so I wanted to look into this a bit more deeply. But let's take a look. I did pull a few passages here from that patent, which a lot of it is very, very literal when you read through it and then read it out loud here. But there are a few points I want to take from it, which we'll start here. This from the top saying, in certain example embodiments, as they are going through giving examples of, say, the image upscale technology that they are trying to patent here and set up, say a computer system may dynamically switch between the type of images that are being output based on the conditions associated with the computer system. Such switching may occur while a game is being played by a user, with perhaps a brief pause while the switch between the two modes occurs. For example, if the computer system is running on battery, e.g. is not plugged into a socket, then the computer system may be configured to not use an example image conversion process that uses the techniques discussed herein. However, if the computer system is plugged into an AC power supply, then the techniques discussed herein for upconverting images for a higher resolution may be used or turned on for a video game or other application. This is because the techniques discussed herein may increase the power consumption of the GPU due to using a greater percentage of the processing power that is available to the GPU being used, up to 80, 90, or 95% or greater. Thus, if the computer system were to run solely off the battery of the mobile device while using, for example, the process shown in Figure 2, it may more quickly deplete the battery. So clearly what they're describing is the idea of the switch, the hybrid nature, handheld to docked, then to handheld again. In that sense, can they go between using DLSS or this advanced AI upscaling that might not even call DLSS? They might not even reference it at all. It just may be something that's baked into the system that's like the Nintendo magic, like how they coined HD Rumble. There's like advanced haptic feedback, that kind of thing. But do they actually need it in handheld mode all the time for every game? Or are there some cases where they can save on battery by just not using it there, but when you do plug it into docked mode, so you drop it into the dock, you sit on the couch, by the time you sit down on the couch, the game is up on the TV and DLSS or advanced AI upscaling has now kicked in. That's kind of the idea here as they are going through this, because that is something that you don't necessarily see systems dealing with currently with this hybrid nature. Yes, you can have docks for the Steam Deck or your ROG Ally, really anything like that that has that USB-C port that's able to do video out and stuff. You can have a dock, but it doesn't come in the box, and it's not necessarily expected to be there at all times, but that's something Nintendo has to deal with here, and it's interesting them going through it where they're setting it up to be as basic or as layman capable as possible, to where you can just drop it in the dock and there it is. Any kind of advanced AI upscaling is enabled, you take it out, and on the fly it can turn it off potentially if needed to save on battery. But here's the interesting one that I saw many people kind of referencing, and I wanted to go in and take a look for myself, which we'll head over here once again to another passage passage from that same patent. Now, here they are starting to describe the idea of using this AI upscaling, or DLSS really, is what we assume they're going to be leveraging, when it comes to file size. They say, for example, the size of textures used by a rendering engine may be decreased. Accordingly, the overall size that is needed to deliver an application like, a video game, may be decreased so as to fit onto relatively smaller sized physical media. E.g. in terms of how much storage space is provided, maybe on a cartridge, and or require a decreased amount of bandwidth or data to download. As an illustrative example, a video game that is designed to output images at 4K natively may have a total size of 60 gigabytes. However, if the size of the images produced by the video game engine are 1080p, then the total size needed for the video game may decrease to, for example, 20 gigabytes. Taking a third out of that file size then. Even if images are then output by the video game engine at 1080p, the techniques herein may be used to transform such images to 4K images during runtime. And clearly, file size is very important to Nintendo because they have to deal within the confines of these cartridges. Nintendo doesn't really want to go above 32 gigabytes even still. I don't think they're going to want to go too much further above that next generation. The 64 gigabyte cartridge is still this mythical thing now. 8 years after the system came out. So I think we'll get there at some point because they're probably just going to have to eventually move up to that cartridge size, or at least give it as some sort of option for even third-party developers. But for first-party, they're trying to fit everything, I think, within 32 gigabytes or less. If they can get it below 16, great. So them working to use textures that, yes, are set up more for 1080p, maybe 720p, but then be able to get it up to 1440p or 4K through all these different upscaling techniques with neural networks and stuff that they're describing in this 40-page patent. That is actually very interesting to hear. Again, the idea of file sizes not ballooning to 100 plus gigabytes, at least for Nintendo, while we're dealing with that everywhere else, is a very welcomed idea, I feel like anyway. And to be able to use some of the upscaling stuff here with that in mind I think is a great idea, but we'll see if it actually works in practice. At least up to this point, Nintendo has been able to turn in some very small file sizes, but they're also dealing with much lower resolutions than pretty much everyone else out there, especially when it comes to asset and texture quality and stuff. So let's see when they start turning in things at 4K or 4K upscaled resolution, what kind of file sizes will they have then? Next up, let's talk about a weird tease that actually came up online, and it was noticed by many different outlets, and in fact, many people tagged me in this because I just did my predictions video and I mentioned Half-Life 3, which is okay, come on, that's a long shot, right? Well, something seems like it's going on because there's a certain account, a certain voice actor who doesn't really post very often unless Valve is getting ready to announce something, because as pointed out by Windows Central, the last time this account was active like this was when Half-Life Alyx was about to come out, which you can see the post here. And this is the full quote. They say, "Another year already. Good to see and hear from so many of you. May the next quarter century deliver as many unexpected surprises. As did the millennium's first. Then again, time is fluid like music. See you in the new year." Yeah, and then, in fact, they panned the entire time with the camera across the scene, and people went through and grabbed every frame and then stacked it up, and there's not a lot to take from that either. Some people are trying to speculate on different colors or areas of the panning image, but to me, I don't know, things do seem to be lining up quite a bit. We hear from different people who really follow along with Valve on the back end with development and SteamDB, that they are testing something. And it kind of sounds like it's Half-Life 3, but then it's like, oh, come on, Half-Life 3, is that really? Are they actually going to do that? Because that would be one of the scariest games to have to work on as a developer, because the expectations are not only through the roof, they're to the moon at this point for a game like that of this mythical status. So I think it'd be interesting just to see what they would do with it, because typically you'd see Valve show up with something like Half-Life 2 did some crazy stuff with physics at its time of release. Half-Life Alyx did some really cool stuff in VR. What's the hook for Half-Life 3? To me, that would be the big question mark there. Although fans would probably just be happy to see it existing in the first place. But I gotta say, all these things kind of coming together, it does feel like something is happening within Valve. So hopefully we find out here in the first half of the year, but I think 2025 is going to be an interesting one for them. Next up, let's talk about a new handheld that was announced ahead of CES, where it seems like it's going to be on display, and I guess people will be able to try it out. And this is from Atari, which they put out a whole trailer here for it, you can see, and they had many shots, many close-ups of different parts of it with some of the face buttons, multiple inputs on the left side, which does include a D-pad that kind of reminiscent of the Xbox Series D-pad, a little bit there. And then it has a number pad on the right side. This is from Atari and My Arcade Retro. Now, I was looking through their assortment of products, and this is apparently called the Game Station Go, which they already have a game station, and all I can assume is they just had a GameCube and a PlayStation in the same room, and they were like, yeah, all right, cool, Game Station. Kind of reminds me a bit of Okama Game Sphere a little bit too, so shout out to South Park on that one. But as they were panning around this handheld, so I had the thought process immediately. Okay, My Arcade Retro. Atari. Well, they have that system, that plug-and-play Atari system, so maybe this is going to be that, just handheld, but then they showed the top of it, has L1, L2, R1, R2, and then has an SD card slot, and now I'm sort of getting the vibe that this might be like an Android-style handheld system. Like, why else would you need an SD card set up like that in a place that's, I mean, it's easy to get to, sure, because normally it'd be, okay, you want to upgrade the firmware. Well, I mean, supporting a micro SD card like that with the storage size we see now would more or less to me be, oh yeah, you can put whatever programs or ROMs that you want on there and play it. I don't, this is an odd one. They didn't really show much else here outside of just the form factor. So seems like we are going, I guess we'll see more at CES 2025. Again, that's happening next week. And it seems like at least My Arcade Retro is going to be there in a big way as they are showing off stuff for Sega and now Atari. So hey, if you're heading out to CES, I guess make sure you stop by their booth to see what this Atari Game Station Go is all about. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Black Myth Wukong on the Xbox, because it has not released. There's been a lot of back and forth as to why it hasn't come out. On one end, it's like, oh, it's technical issues. On the other, Sony has done something to keep it off of Xbox, whether it's a deal when it comes to help with development of the game to get it out on the PlayStation 5, or just outright money hatting. But it seems, at least according to the CEO in a recent post, that it actually does have to do with that Xbox Series S. Well, we can see this is posted up. This is over on Pure Xbox. They say, according to a translated New Year's post from the Game Science CEO on Weibo, the Xbox version suffered optimization issues. Quote, the only thing missing is the Xbox, which somehow feels a bit wrong, but that 10 gigabytes of shared memory without years of optimization experience is really hard to make work. And this is still, to me, an issue for Microsoft to resolve, because they do have the ability to go in and help different developers as needed in terms of priority list. Maybe they didn't see Black Myth Wukong as doing the kind of numbers that it did, but that is a game that should have high priority over many other ones, just based on how popular and explosive it was with sales and interest, to where you just work to get it out the door with them. Okay, so the Xbox Series S has come up many times, specifically around RAM. 10 gigabytes, which we've talked about, even the Switch 2, and that's to have 12 gigabytes. So that will also have more RAM technically than the Xbox Series S. And that seems to be the biggest concern when developers have spoken out about this. Oh, the RAM situation is something we're trying to figure out, trying to work around, because it's shared memory. So you have some of it even just allotted over to the system, so you don't have full access to it for games in general. And some people have gone out and said, oh, well, the Steam Deck plays it fine. Well, I mean, still, when it comes to development across the Steam Deck versus the Xbox Series S, it's also still not apples to apples there. And clearly there is a hang up here with the Xbox Series. I mean, this is the CEO from Game Science just putting it out there. So hopefully they're able to work through that, but it doesn't, at least from this. I mean, it's coming from the CEO. It doesn't seem like it has to do with Sony necessarily. Well, there could still be some sort of timed exclusivity that's not being mentioned, and oh yeah, after like 6 months, 7 months, then it'll come out. But at least for now, seems like that 10 gigabytes of shared memory on the Xbox Series S is a bit of a hang-up. I don't know if Microsoft will get to a point where they tell developers, look, if it doesn't work on the Series S now, but the Series X version works, you can split them up because they've been very, very serious about keeping all of that under one umbrella, with very few exceptions, like Baldur's Gate 3, where they had an issue with co-op or split screen and they had to take that off of the Xbox Series S version. They might want to rethink that for certain games, especially something like Black Myth Wukong. And before we go to the comments of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. That is Game of the Year Madness. Animal Well versus Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade taking this one 67% to 33%. I enjoyed both of these games here. Animal Well, I think, did go under the radar for many people. Could have been the look or the aesthetic. It's like that 8-bit, 16-bit style 2D Metroidvania. It's a very creative game, very interesting game, and it certainly sets a really cool atmosphere. Like if you turn the lights off and just have the surround sound going for this one, it's just has a way of sort of pulling you into its world. And with Stellar Blade, it's just a really fun action style game. Definitely reminds me a bit more of like the PS2 days in a good way, right? For that kind of a title. So really cool titles there. But in this case, Stellar Blade, moving on. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Randy, who says, they don't need to announce this thing at all. It's being announced piece by piece. Well, technically you're right. It is. It like literally is. And I'm trying to think of what the next thing would be, which, I mean, is it just the system being turned on camera? That's kind of what it feels like. Although we haven't seen a full shot of the Joy-Con itself, we did see a very, very cropped shot of the Joy-Con. So maybe that's the next step. Yeah, okay, we'll just see an entire Joy-Con right there. Anything that we can pull from that to be different from the current Joy-Con controllers. But honestly, I wouldn't be shocked now if we do actually see the system turn on in some way before Nintendo is able to reveal it. And I have a feeling that's not gonna make them very happy to see randomly pop up online. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to see PlayStation 1 games running on a GameCube through emulation. It's actually possible now, and I'll leave that right below. Thanks, guys, for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.